All right. Well, greetings and welcome to our daily Devo for Saturday, June the 10th. We are on our third day in Jerusalem. Today, we're at the location known as the Broad Wall. Second Chronicles chapter 32 is cited here for us today, verses 1 through 8. Verse 7 is the one that they record for us or print out for us here. Be strong and courageous. How many times have we heard that? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged because of the king of Assyria and the vast army with him. For there is a greater power with us than with him. I've looked at the broad wall from many angles. It's unattractive from them all. Those who stop for a look, and many don't, quickly move on to more interesting sights in the holy city. But when we know its story, this unassuming wall teaches one of the most powerful lessons Jerusalem has to offer, a lesson for those overwhelmed by their circumstances. The wall's builder, King Hezekiah, was an aggressive reformer who reversed the horrendous policies of his predecessor, King Ahaz. Ahaz had fostered trust in all the wrong places, believing that his country's survival depended on building a strong alliance with the Assyrian Empire. And he sought to secure that relationship with Assyria by adopting their worship practices and encouraging the worship of pagan gods, even going so far as importing them into the Lord's temple. Hezekiah worked to disassemble every one of these policies that robbed the temple and the Lord of their due respect. King Hezekiah's religious reforms also had ramifications for national security because they shattered the alliance his father had made with Assyria. Hezekiah knew the Assyrian army would soon be on the march, so he prepared Jerusalem for the inevitable siege through a number of public works projects. He strengthened existing defensive walls and expanded the city's defensive perimeter from 32 acres to 125 acres. That's 4 times the size. By adding walls that enclosed 2 neighboring hills to the west, this is where we find what remains of the broad wall. You may be curious about its name. This section of the new wall transited through a dip in the terrain, so it was built higher to offset the topography. To keep the wall stable, this higher section also had to be built wider, hence its name. This surviving section of Hezekiah's building efforts shows not just where the wall was positioned, but how aggressively Hezekiah worked to create the additional space Jerusalem needed to accommodate refugees fleeing the Assyrian invasions. It quietly but powerfully teaches us that when faced with impending challenges, Hezekiah did what he could. When the Assyrian army arrived, Hezekiah gave his citizens a pep talk. But instead of encouraging them to trust in the things he had done, he urged them to look confidently toward the Lord, the greater power with us, who is ready to help us and to fight our battles. That's from 2 Chronicles 32, 7 and 8. Here is a model to follow. When faced with unparalleled challenges, Hezekiah did what he could and then trusted the one who could do more. The broad wall reminds us to do the same. So many people think that faith is just about sitting back and letting God do whatever God is going to do We don't have to raise a finger. Totally incorrect. Noah had to build an ark. Solomon built a temple. Paul traveled the world building churches, not physical buildings, but the real church, the spiritual church. God does the rest. We simply add our obedience to what he asks of us, and then we say, I'm not trusting me in this, I'm trusting you, Lord. And that's what Hezekiah did. It is a great example. He did what he could. He did what he could. Extending the walls, making them higher, wider, extending the boundaries of the city to wait for those who would have to flee from the Assyrian armies and come to Jerusalem for protection. He thought of all of those things, and he did what he could. And God did the rest. What circumstances, our two questions today, what circumstances have you faced or are you facing now that have left you feeling overwhelmed? What circumstances have you faced or are you facing now that have left you feeling overwhelmed? And why do we feel overwhelmed in the middle of these things? Because we're only trusting ourselves, our ideas, our thoughts, our efforts. And we get overwhelmed in that because we can't stand up to the tsunami coming toward us. Second question, what can you do to foster trust in the one who can do more? Good question for you today. You're facing something, you're feeling overwhelmed, but what can you do to improve, to foster that dependence, that trust in the one who can do more, that faith in the one who can do more? Here's our prayer for today. Lord, I feel overwhelmed as Israel must have felt watching the powerful army of Assyria advancing against them. Help me to follow the lead of Hezekiah. May I do all I can, and then may I trust you, the one who can do more. Blessings to you today on this Saturday.